This is BBC News with myself, Lukwasa Birak. In a moment, we'll be taking a look at tomorrow morning's papers with my guests. First, just a quick reminder of those headlines. And Theresa May has warned MPs preparing to vote on her EU withdrawal deal that a failure to deliver Brexit would be a catastrophic and unforgivable breach of trust in our democracy, she said. A man is questioned by the police after an 11-year-old boy is killed in a hit-and-run accident in Beswick in Greater Manchester. 3 people have been killed and a 4th is missing after an avalanche near the Austrian ski resort of Lech. There have been more than 20 weather-related deaths across parts of the Alps this month. 2 men have died in separate falls whilst walking in the Mourne Mountains in County Down. The first victim fell on Wee Binion Mountain, whilst the second man fell on Slieve Comedar. And there's pressure on Donald Trump as the partial shutdown of the US government becomes the longest in history, with no end in sight to the political standoff. Hello and welcome to our look ahead to what the papers will be bringing us tomorrow morning. With me I've got the business journalist John Crowley and Rachel Cunliffe, commenter and features editor at City AM. Lovely to have you both here this evening. Big few days coming up. So let's just take a look at those front pages, and we'll start off on the Metro, the eve, of course, of a crucial week in Westminster. Unsurprising, then, that Brexit does dominate those headlines. Theresa May tomorrow urging MPs to back her deal before they vote on it come Tuesday. The Metro is calling it her last bid to take back control. 24 hours to save Brexit is the lead for the Daily Express, saying that the Prime Minister is racing against the clock to get the support of her colleagues. Let's turn to the Daily Telegraph, which reports that a coalition of pro-EU MPs will unite in a call for another Brexit referendum by publishing draft legislation tomorrow that would give voters a chance between Mrs May's deal or staying in the EU. And if the Prime Minister fails to get her deal through the Commons, according to The Guardian, well, the EU, it says, is preparing to offer the Prime Minister a delay to Brexit until at least July. And finally, aside from the goings-on in Westminster, The Times has a photograph of the waves breaking in front of Whitby Abbey in North Yorkshire, warning that a cold snap is on its way. So those are the front pages, and like we said, leading on Brexit. So let's start there, shall we? We'll start with the Metro and May's last bid to take back control. John, do you want to start off with that?
Yes, the most important week for Theresa May and the country since last week. But actually, we have actually got a big event this week. We've got the meaningful vote on Tuesday. The Metro is thinking that she's not going to win, which is not the biggest reveal in the world. But it's got to such a bad stage now that any defeat under 100 votes, I think the government is spinning as some kind of success where she'll be able to go back to Brussels, say, well, look, give us another bone, and then she can come back and vote again.
Under 100, you said there are estimates that she's going to lose it by over 200, as many as 228, which would be the biggest defeat of a government, I think, in history. Yeah. I think what's interesting is we had all the reports that she was going to lose it in December when she initially tabled the vote, and then she pulled it at the last minute and was going to go back to the EU and negotiate and get some concessions in order to have a different outcome this time. And in fact, nothing has changed. Maybe a couple of Tory MPs have said, I was going to vote against it, but now I think it's the best of some bad options, but very, very, very few. And actually, she went back to the EU that week, having pulled the vote, and said, can I have some concessions now? And the EU just said, no, absolutely not. So how is this different to when it was originally planned in December? It's not, except we run out of time.
OK, well, let's turn to The Independent, and apparently a fresh referendum, a new referendum. What on, though? What's it going to say?
Well, it's been dubbed a final say. So this is Dominic Grieve, who's been cast as a rebel MP, former Attorney General, who was supposedly behind the machinations last week with the Speaker John Bercow over a bill which would force the government to come up with a plan B if Tuesday's vote doesn't work. Their plan is to come up to establish the legal framework for a public vote and propose another referendum, and The Independent is reporting this could happen as soon as Wednesday.
Again, do the public have, the appetite for another referendum?
Well, they have the appetite for a film on the referendum that we saw last week with the Brexit film with Dominic Cummings there, which really showed the public sentiment and the emotion and the anger the last time round. So why it would be any more cordial this time round, I don't know. But I think the point is that the concession that the Rebels got from Theresa May last week was that if she loses the vote, which she's going to lose the vote, then she has to come up with a new plan within 3 days. And what this plan would enable them to do is when she fails to come up with a plan, because she has a history of kicking the can down the road and actually not acting and running out of time, this would enable Parliament to say, well, you don't have a plan, we have a plan, we are going to extend or postpone the end of Article 50, and we're going to have these final say referendums, and they, according to this, with the help of John Bercow, would be able to do that.
OK, so at the front of the Daily Mail, another plan apparently, or rather a coup, as the paper says. Brexit coup plotters have a blueprint for power.
I'm not sure it's a coup if it's parliamentary MPs who re-elected.
Well, so this is all coming from the Sunday Times story earlier on today, which is where MPs will take control of the legislatory agenda and business over and above the government. So there's been customs and rules and conventions in place that the government controls the parliamentary agenda. And there's particularly with what Brexiteers would describe as a speaker who is not neutral, who is open to kind of the Remainers, that there's apparently a liaison committee which is dominated by Remainers, which would be charged with drawing up new Brexit legislation. And there's one cabinet minister speaking off the record said the move was a copper-bottomed, bulletproof plan to sink Brexit, which relies on the fact that the government has no majority and that the Speaker will bend the rules.
Well, I think the point about having no majority, that's the important thing. The only way it's been able to get to this point is because the government is so weak and has no plan about what to do to move forward. We know that there isn't a majority for May's deal, there isn't a majority for no deal, there isn't a majority for another referendum. We are in stalemate and gridlock, and when that happens, people start to look towards the technicalities of parliamentary procedure to try and work out a solution that way. And the only reason that this is even being contemplated is because the government is effectively out of options.
OK. Turning to the Telegraph, jiggery-pokery might give a clue as to who's saying that. His play on words, his use of words.
Yes.
Boris Johnson has a plan.
Yeah.
Yeah, so he's describing the plot as a Blofeld-style, 007 plot to kind of bring, what the Remainers are doing. They're likely to...
Did you say 007?
Well, no, Blofeld, his nemesis,
oh, okay.
007's nemesis, Blofeld, is likely to, that they're pulling the wool over eyes. And of course, Boris is...
Brexiteers are James Bond in this analogy.
Yeah, well, but Boris always plays in Boris's world, he's always the goodie, isn't he?
Boris Johnson is James Bond, I've got it.
Yeah, OK. He might need to work on his pecs.
You've got something on Brexit?
He might need to work on his pecs and his attire and dress sense. I don't think he dresses as well as James Bond. But it's Boris being Boris, and he's using colourful language to... And, look, he's actually been quite... In the parliamentary sphere, he's been quite quiet over the last few months. He's come with some interventions, and now, so he's got his column in the Telegraph. So he is issuing a rallying cry ahead of the vote on Tuesday.
I mean, we've read the column. It is the same column. If you've read any of Boris Johnson's Telegraph columns, it's the same one that he writes every week. What he would like to do, obviously, is for there to be a no-deal Brexit. He's saying it will not be as catastrophic as everyone is making out. And he does make an interesting point, is that Theresa May has stopped using the threat of a no-deal Brexit and is now using the threat of no Brexit at all in order to try and convince MPs. But he's saying it wouldn't be that bad. I mean, vast proportion of the business and political community and the legal community and
Disagree.
would disagree with him. But he has a plan. He's got a 4-bullet-point plan for how a no-deal Brexit would work.
OK, in the meantime, on the front of The Guardian, the EU, it looks as is offering some technical deal, I think.
Well, this is it may be a horror of horrors to everyone, whatever you're a Remainer or a Brexiteer, because there's a possibility we may extend Article 50. I don't actually know if it's around Article 50, but they may delay Brexit until July, which means we're going to have to keep on talking about this possibly into the summer. It is a proper story, though, because Daniel Boffey, who is their Brussels correspondent, spoken to an EU official who said, should the Prime Minister survive and inform us that she needs more time to win round Parliament to a deal, a technical extension up to July will be offered.
But Rachel, rather than, because we're going to have a longer papers, I'd like you, because I want to finish off on Murray. Great news, but very quickly, could you pick up on the wood burner story on the front of the Telegraph for us?
Yes, this is Michael Gove, the Environment Secretary, saying that wood-burning stoves and other forms of high carbon emission energy sources could be banned. What's interesting about wood-burning stoves is that people think, it's wood, it's not a fossil fuel, and it's renewable, and therefore it's better for the environment. Actually, it can produce more smoke and be worse for the environment, and we're not planting trees at the rate that we need to replace them. And so if you've got a wood-burning stove, you're part of the problem and the government's coming after it.
But how many are there? OK, very quickly,
Not in
you've
London.
Both seen Andy Murray. This has been a big story this week. You've both seen him in action.
I'm so sad that he's retiring, and I think he's had such an incredible career, but to be forced to retire because of an injury before he was ready, I think the whole nation is kind of on side with that.
And the Telegraph story is that Wimbledon are saying they're going to honour Andy Murray with a statue, which I don't think anyone will complain about. And the journey that he's gone from being this kind of scruffy, dour kind of teenager to kind of a national treasure almost, really. And he has won us over. And we've both seen him. So I was lucky enough.
He's phenomenal to watch.
Yeah, we've both been lucky enough to see him. So I saw him win Olympic gold, where I entered the draw, and luckily I didn't win every ticket I'd applied for, otherwise I would have gone bankrupt. But I got a ticket for the final, where he beat Roger Federer in 2012.
So he could be joining Fred Perry.
Well,
great,
Sue Barker calls him the greatest British player there has ever been, and Federer said he's a good guy, Hall of Famer, legend, and that's coming from Federer.
Fantastic. Perfect place to end. You're back at 11:30,
yes.
So we'll spend more time on those lovely Brexit stories. Rachel and John, I know I can tell. Thank you so much, and thank you for watching.